Hello traders, welcome to your daily market update for Thursday the 25th of June 2015. Overnight the euro was quite flat and we didn't get any outcomes. There was a whole bunch of comments back and forth, but there was no substance to any of it. But today we do have the Euro group meeting once again, and that's really going to take dominance in the market. We don't have a lot of data coming out that's really of great importance. So the European session is really going to be headline driven. In the US session, however, we do have some US data that we do want to pay attention to. We have continuing jobless claims, we have the PCE index, initial jobless claims, personal spending and income will also be heavily watched, as that is a good indicator that the Fed is looking for, followed by services PMI later on in the session. Throughout into New Zealand session the following day, we do have imports and exports, but we also have trade balance, and the trade balance is expected to turn into contractionary territory, as you can see here. And that's not surprisingly, considering we have had some pretty negative dairy price auctions over the last few months, and they have all been consecutively, and at some point that does need to take a hit on the New Zealand dollar. The New Zealand dollar has bounced a little bit on the back of this weaker Australian dollar in the current Asian session, but tomorrow it may actually run into a resistance level and stage its next move lower if we actually see trade balance have a pretty big miss, as it is expected. Moving over to the US dollar, and you can have a look right here and see that we did come off a little bit early in the session, but then we bounced and staged quite a strong rally. Since then, in the Asian session, we have had a little bit of a pullback to this trend line, and we'll see if we can get a bounce off it and stage the next move higher. We'll keep an eye on that. I won't be really paying much attention to the US dollar until we do move towards the US session, and we will be keeping an eye on exactly how the data rolls out and the market's interpretations for a future interest rate hike, as that's ultimately what the market is looking at data to try and give it indications for in the short term. Moving over to the charts, you can see here on the daily, we are on the New Zealand dollar. We have had some pretty significant falls with the occasional pullback, as you can see here. We might be getting something similar to that right now, and then we may run into resistance as the market gets a negative trade balance coming out of New Zealand tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. The trend is definitely down, momentum is definitely against it, and also it will be struggling to move higher if the US dollar does remain strong in the next few sessions as well. So that will only compound to the problems that the New Zealand dollar is having. The Australian dollar is still range bound. You can see here we're also having a bit of a bounce on the weaker US dollar in today's Asian session, but nonetheless we are still stuck between this range. It is a range that I'm following and believes going to remain intact until the US dollar really picks up momentum, or until we hear something from the RBA. We did note that the IMF has also encouraged the RBA to not take another interest rate cut off the table. So it's going to be interesting to see whether the RBA takes those comments on board and whether the market actually latches onto that and starts to anticipate the RBA potentially cutting rates into the future. If that's the case, that could be the catalyst for the breakout to the downside, and of course also the pending interest rate hike for the US would also create havoc for the Australian dollar. The euro remained quite flat. We did have the falls on the previous day, but yesterday it really just was flat, and we have been flat all day today, as the market really doesn't know what's going to happen with Greece, and we are getting closer to a potential default. So it's going to be interesting to see how the markets react in the next few weeks, but who knows exactly when we're going to get an outcome either way. When we do, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of volatility. The Great British Pound, as you can see, has continued its pullback after this stellar run. So now I'm looking for areas of support, and somewhere between 157 and 156 is a potential support zone. So I would be looking for a potential bounce there, but for that to happen, we would need to see the US dollar start to sell off, as we don't have any other UK data out this week. So we'll see, possibly if the US continues its strong run, we could make a run down to the 156 in the next few sessions. Keep an eye on the shorter time frames and just keep an eye on those trend lines and support and resistance. Australian dollar versus the Canadian dollar did stage a pretty nice rally. Oil did come off overnight as well, helping. We did come up and we did breach the 124 major resistance level, and I have highlighted in here like a resistance support level band. It's not actually a line, as such. And as you can see, the market faded back through into that zone. It is struggling to make a breakout, but at some point I do believe we will be getting a breakout, and we will see the prices get away from this consolidation and indecisive price action that we've seen. But for now, we are contained, and we do have a fair few areas of resistance to navigate, as well as some trend lines. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and keep an eye on the oil prices in the next few sessions, but we could be range bound until the US session. We see what the data presents. The US dollar versus the Japanese yen actually had a good rally yesterday, and it faded out as soon as it couldn't take out the previous high of 124.4. And as such, today in the Asian session, we have had a pullback, and we are making a run for 123.50. We'll see if 123.50 can hold up. If it can't hold up and offer support, we could be making our way down to 123 or 122.5. And we would be back down into this support zone and looking for indications of how the price action will react on the back of that. But that's going to be subject to today's US data. Well, I wish you all the best. It is going to be another session of watching and following the Greek circus, and who knows the outcome. So all we can do is remain out of the market in terms of the euro pairs, or if we are jumping in and dipping our toe in, just doing it on a short-term basis, as we don't know how the market will react, should we, or when, or if we're going to get an outcome anytime soon. Well, that's it from me today. I'll be back again tomorrow, so until then, trade well.